This is a Monstrum Banshee 1 to 10 power LPVO, which many people, myself included, have said is an excellent budget scope for the money. But compared to what? This is a SIG Sauer Tango, also a 1 to 10 power LPVO, and we're going to see how well a budget tier scope stacks up against a major name brand. Hey, Moondog here. Today we're going to be comparing a Monstrum Banshee to a SIG Sauer Tango. Both of these are second focal plane 1 to 10 power LPVOs. And I just want to be upfront that this video is being sponsored by Monstrum Tactical, and I know that may make some of you suspicious about, the fairness of this video, but I want to assure you that I'm going to be as objective as possible. In fact, when Monstrum first proposed doing a head-to-head comparison, I turned them down because I don't like to do these sort of pissing contest videos between brands. I try to be as brand and as model agnostic as possible. And I said that if I was going to compare their budget LPVO to a higher end LPVO, I'm just going to end up showing how much better this Tango is to their Banshee. And surprisingly, Monstrum said, no, that's fine. They fully suspect that's going to be the case, but they just want me to show you just in which ways a higher-end LPVO is going to perform against their budget LPVO, which costs roughly half the price of the higher-end LPVO, and in which ways, perhaps, if any, they match up in terms of performance. So they sent both of these out for me to test and review today, and I just want to show you that both of them were brand new, sealed in the box. They were shipped directly from a popular online retailer, so they weren't sent from Monstrum. It's not like Monstrum sent me a junk model of a SIG they happen to have. Both of them were brand new. So I'm going to show you what you get in the box, compare both of the two features externally, and more importantly, we're going to take it out to the range and we're going to see just how both of these perform using the same targets at the same distances. So let's get started. Let's start by comparing what you get in the box, starting with the Tango. Pretty much everything you need is in there, including a mount. The Banshee also comes with a mount as well as similar tools and accessories. Let's compare both of these scope specs side by side. The Banshee is an inch longer than the Tango. Despite that, it is 3 ounces lighter. The objective lens on the Tango is 28mm versus the Banshee's 24, which means that the Tango is able to draw in more light because of its larger objective lens. Of course, whether or not it appears brighter is dependent on the glass quality and coatings. Both have a range of magnification of 1 to 10 power with a second focal plane reticle. The Tango has a larger tube diameter of 34mm versus the Banshee's 30, which means the Tango is capable of a greater range of internal adjustments. Though in a practical sense that may not be all that relevant since neither of these scopes was designed to be easily adjusted for highly ballistic long-range trajectories. The Banshee has a bit more eye relief, almost an inch, 4.5 versus the Tango's 3.54 inches. Both have illuminated reticles, though very different in design, as we'll see. The Banshee offers you the option of illuminating in either red or green color, and both are powered by a 2032 coin battery. Let's start with a quick look at the overall design of these LPVOs, and I've done an in-depth review of each of these scopes. You'll find those videos on my channel. Starting with the Banshee, this is a budget scope, so they designed it to have simpler, cleaner lines to make it easier and cheaper to manufacture. Despite this, the overall design is modern, clean, Spartan, without looking cheap. The Tango, on the other hand, has many more details like subtle curves, cuts, and knurling. You can tell that this scope has spent more time on a CNC lathe than the Banshee. Both have capped turrets, the Banshee a little taller and easier to read.
Oh, nice.
The Tango's turrets are audible but not as tactile positive.
Nice.
The Banshee has a small, permanently affixed fin on the magnification ring, whereas the Tango has a legit throw lever, which you can remove. Both scopes come with an offset mount. The Monstrum's design, like its scope, is very clean, simple, and austere, functional and solidly constructed, but a few minor blemishes. The SIG Sauer mount is a much more refined design with many lightning cuts and printed information on the amount of torque to place on its screws. Together, the Banshee and its mount weigh 654 grams, or under 1.5 pounds in freedom units. The Tango and its mount, on the other hand, weigh 747.5 grams, or 1.65 pounds. Alright, let's get to the meat of the matter and compare both of these scopes optically. Okay, we have the Tango on the left and the Banshee on the right, and we're looking at the peak of Mount Davidson at 1 power. There's no noticeable fish-eyeing, so 1 power looks like 1 power on both of these LPVOs. There's a little bit more contrast and saturation in the Tango, but the overall image at 1 power is about the same on both. Now let's bring it up to 10 power. Now, I know most people would never think of using an LPVO to engage a target at 1,300 yards, but depending on the rifle and caliber, in theory, you could if the image was clear enough. Now, at this magnification, I can see that the Tango's image appears to be a bit darker and muddier and has less detail than the Banshee. Now, in both of these scopes, I can identify the trail marker sign on the top of that hill. That's a 36 inch tall sign, which is a good proxy for a torso-sized steel target at this distance. Utilizing either of these reticles and their elevation subtensions, do you think you could hit a steel target at this distance? Okay, now we're at the rifle range, and I'm going to set up a testing bench, and we're going to look through both LPVOs at this same target from 50 yards away. Again, we have the Tango on the left and the Banshee on the right, and we have both LPVOs set at 1 power. And we are looking at the same set of reference targets hung up downrange at 50 yards. Now, looking at the image in both scopes, there's a little bit more contrast in the Banshee this time instead of the Tango. And looking at that target from 50 yards at 1 power, I really can't make out much detail at all on it other than where it is. Alright, let's bring them up to 10 power and take a look at those targets. Unfortunately, I was noticing too many reflections in the glass to judge the targets cleanly, so I decided to move my setup to a more shaded part of the range. And in this video still, we can see a clear difference between the images rendered in the Tango versus the Banshee at 10 power. There is a significantly greater amount of chromatic aberration in the Tango. That's that color fringing you'll see at the edge of where the white target backer meets the dark background. That chromatic aberration is a form of prism or prismatic effect of light as it bends through the different glass elements in the scope. Specialized coating on glass can reduce that prismatic effect, and the coatings on the Banshee certainly look like they're doing a better job than the Tango. Now, the prismatic effect of chromatic aberration can reduce the overall sense of sharpness and clarity. You can see an example of this in the color chart on the top left. The colors are a little bit more vibrant in the Tango, but the details in the chart are much clearer and sharper on the Banshee. Now, looking at the U.S. Air Force optical resolution chart, which is on the bottom right of this target quadrant, I can make out both horizontal and vertical lines down to element 1 and group -1 for the Tango, but on the Banshee I can make out the next element smaller, element 2. And the whole target overall just looks sharper and clearer on the Banshee. Chromatic aberration can also blur or wash out subtle details. For example, in the paper target on the bottom left there, I can make out two .22 caliber holes below the reactive sticker target through the Banshee, but I really can't see, or I would notice, those holes through the Tango. And while I can make out all the details on the target well enough to hit it, as we noted earlier when looking at that hilltop, at 10 power, the overall image on the Tango is a bit darker, not as bright as the Banshee. Speaking of brightness, next let's take a look at the reticle illumination. Starting with 1, 2, and these are night vision compatible, 3, 4, 5, and I can already start seeing it 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And that is pretty bright without flaring out. In fact, here, let's take a look at what this looks like against a darker background. And let's pull this back and see how bright this is at 1 power, because that's really where we're going to be using that illumination. And against that daylight bright column, not quite daylight bright, but, still quite usable for indoors and in low light. Next, let's take a look at the Banshee, which only has 5 levels of brightness, but in 2 different colors. So let's start with red in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then turning off, we'll go to green 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the green is, well, at least to me, visually brighter than the red. Okay, we're pulling the magnification down, and we're going to see what that reticle looks like at 1 power. And it's quite bright, and going over to that sunlit column, nope, again, not quite daylight bright, but in CQB and in low light, quite visible. Finally, let's take a look at what I think is the most obvious difference between these 2 LPVOs, and that would be their reticle. The Tango has a very modern tactical reticle. This is in the form of an illuminated horseshoe, which functions like a red dot. There are also lead indicator arrowheads on either side of that horseshoe to help you aim at a walking or moving target, as well as a calibrated Christmas tree below that horseshoe. And if that wasn't enough, there's also a European T-style reticle on the outer edge of your circle of view. Now, in stark contrast, the Banshee has a very unusual reticle for an LPVO. This is really a traditional long-range targeting reticle with a set of crosshairs and mill-style subtension hash marks on the crosshairs. And the illuminated part of the reticle is this octagon, or is it a square with clipped-off corners that is too big to be used as a center point for anything other than a shotgun or a grenade launcher? It makes for a rather strange choice of reticle for an LPVO. All right, before I get into what I think of these LPVOs after testing them out, I'd like to ask just a quick favor. Hit that like button right now. It just takes a second. But, you know, the fact that you're still watching this video probably means you like it, or at least are getting some good information out of it. So I appreciate that. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to my channel. It's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you anything when you hit that subscribe button. But what it does is it tells the algorithm that this is the kind of content you like to watch. So you'll start seeing more videos like this on your feed as opposed to the random crap it usually suggests. And it doesn't hurt to hit that bell icon either. You'll be notified when I post my next scope review video. All right, I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. I thought the SIG was going to totally wipe the floor with the Banshee, but this actually held its own. And you know, I've actually reviewed this scope before, but I kind of forgot how good it was, or at least didn't appreciate how sharp it was optically. It is a little bit sharper than the Tango. It has less chromatic aberration at 10 power. It's got a 1 inch further eye relief at 10 power, and has a much more forgiving eye box at 10 power than the Tango. So yeah, it actually, you know, it's not bad for the price, like half the price of the Tango. But you know, I'm not going to be one of those guys who's going to claim that this is as good as a high-end optic. And I'm not even talking about the Tango. I mean, there's loopholes and like $2,000 Night Force. Those are in a whole nother league. So if you have the means, and if you are professional, I mean, this is neither of these are going to be in the same league, to be perfectly honest. But these are still quite good LPVOs for the price, depending on what your budget is. Now, the one feature I would have to say that does the Banshee a disservice is its reticle. That old school sort of, you know, the reticle kind of looks like what you'd see on TV when you're seeing what the sniper is seeing. It's not a tactical reticle. It's not a reticle that I would pick for an LPVO. The Tango has a far more practical and useful reticle, to be quite honest. And if I had my pick, I'd still pick the Tango simply because of the reticle. If Banshee offered a similar reticle, hands down, I would say that this is probably the better pick. But it doesn't, so there you go. But that's my opinion. Ask 10 people their opinions on a reticle, and you'll get 20 different opinions, right? So anyway, I want to thank Monstrum for sending both of these out for me to test and evaluate, and I'm going to have to box these up and send them back to them. But if you're interested in either of them, I think you wouldn't be at a disservice for picking either one of these. And you can find more information as well as product links for both of these LPVOs on my full written review at moondogindustries.com. Definitely check out that article. There's product links there. Use those links and help support this channel. All right, well, thanks again for watching. You be safe out there. Moondog out. to know what you thought of this video. Leave me a comment or chat with me on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, MeWe, Instagram, or Locals. And if you want to see all of my videos, go to moondogindustries.com.